You felt it, didn't you? Not in a dramatic text message, not in a sudden confession, not even in physical presence, but in the energy. The silence feels different now. For months, maybe years, the silence between you and your divine masculine felt heavy, dense, unfinished. It carried confusion, resistance, pride, and unspoken emotion. It felt like a door half closed, like a storm that refused to break. But this feels still, grounded, intentional. Something has shifted. And if you're sensitive to energy, if you've done the inner work, if you've cried the tears and released the attachment, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The waiting energy is gone. The chasing energy is gone. The chaotic push and pull that once defined your connection has softened into something unfamiliar, something steady. So what happened? What changed inside him? Because make no mistake, this shift did not begin on the outside. It began within. For so long, the divine masculine archetype in this journey has been associated with delay, avoidance, retreat. He ran from vulnerability. He hid behind logic. He convinced himself that distance was strength, that detachment was protection, that silence was control. But here's the truth no one talks about. He was never waiting for the right time. He was waiting to become the right man. And that transformation does not happen loudly. It happens in the dark, in isolation, in moments no one sees. Have you noticed how the energy no longer feels reactive? How the anxiety that once gripped your chest has quieted? How you're not obsessively checking for signs anymore? That's not coincidence. That's alignment. When the divine masculine begins to awaken, the first sign isn't communication. It's calm. It's a subtle energetic recalibration that says, I am no longer running. You might wake up one morning and realize you're not angry anymore, not desperate, not clinging to the outcome. And strangely, that's when you feel him closer than ever. Why? Because chasing creates noise, but readiness creates stillness. There was a time when his energy felt scattered. You could sense his confusion, his internal conflict, one foot in, one foot out, his heart pulling toward you while his fear dragged him backward. It created emotional turbulence. And you felt it. Every time he withdrew, every time he resurfaced, every time he sent mixed signals that left you questioning your intuition. But now, there's no mixed signal in the field. There is direction. Even if he hasn't spoken yet, even if you haven't reunited physically, energetically, the waiting phase has ended. And that's what makes this moment powerful. Because readiness in the divine masculine doesn't look dramatic at first. It looks like quiet certainty. It looks like a man who has finally stopped fighting himself. Imagine this. For years he distracted himself. Work, friends, other relationships, goals, validation. He told himself he was fine. He convinced himself he had control. But in the quiet moments, late at night driving alone staring at the ceiling, your presence lingered. Not as obsession, but as truth. And truth is patient. Truth doesn't chase. Truth waits until the ego exhausts itself. And eventually it does. There comes a point where running becomes more painful than staying. Where pretending not to care becomes heavier than surrendering. Where distraction no longer numbs the connection. That's the breaking point. But what you're sensing now isn't the breaking. It's what comes after. Integration. He is no longer resisting what he feels. And that changes everything. Let me ask you something. Have you noticed that you don't feel the urge to do anything anymore? You're not manifesting him obsessively. You're not scripting messages in your head. You're not analyzing every past conversation. There's a softness in you now. A quiet knowing. That's not detachment. That's preparation. Because when the divine masculine shifts from avoidance to awareness, the divine feminine feels it before it's visible. Energy moves first. Action follows. And right now, the energetic field between you is stabilizing. This is not the restless energy of longing. It is the grounded energy of decision. Some viewers might be thinking, but he hasn't reached out yet. Understand this clearly. Readiness is an internal decision before it becomes an external move. A man can be spiritually ready weeks or months before he gathers the courage to step forward physically. But once the internal shift happens, the direction is irreversible. He is no longer negotiating with his ego. He is no longer debating whether this connection is real. He knows. And knowing creates movement, even if that movement is slow at first. Think about the difference between impulse and intention. Before, he may have reached out impulsively, lonely, nostalgic, triggered. That energy felt unstable, inconsistent, temporary. Now the energy feels measured, grounded, deliberate. That's the difference between a man who misses you and a man who chooses you. The divine masculine who is ready for union is not frantic. He is focused. He is not reacting to emotion. He is responding to truth. And you can feel that shift in your body. There's less anxiety, less urgency, more trust. Union energy does not feel chaotic, feels inevitable. So why now? Why after all this time? Because growth cannot be rushed. The runner phase wasn't punishment. It was preparation. He had to confront his fears of vulnerability, his fear of inadequacy, his fear of not being enough. Many divine masculines carry deep subconscious wounds around worthiness, around provision, around emotional expression. He could not return to you half-formed. He had to meet himself first. And that meeting is rarely graceful. It's uncomfortable, humbling, sometimes lonely. But once a man faces himself honestly, once he stops blaming timing, circumstances, or you, clarity replaces confusion. And clarity is powerful. You are not imagining this shift. You are not being delusional. You are sensing alignment. The divine masculine is no longer standing at the edge of decision. He has stepped into it. And this is where the story changes. Because when he was waiting, you felt suspended, stuck between hope and heartbreak. But now, there is forward momentum. It may be subtle. It may be unfolding quietly. But it is steady. And steady wins over dramatic every time. So as we move deeper into this video, we're going to unpack exactly what caused this shift, what broke inside him, what healed inside him, and what ready for union truly means beyond fantasy. But before we go there, take a breath. Tune into your body. Ask yourself honestly, does this energy feel different? Does it feel calmer? More certain? If the answer is yes, then you're not at the beginning anymore. You're at the turning point. The divine masculine is no longer waiting. He's no longer hiding behind delay. He's no longer pretending he doesn't feel it. He's preparing to step forward, not from impulse, not from fear, not from loneliness, but from readiness. And readiness changes everything. Before there was this calm shift, before there was readiness, there was silence. Not just physical silence, emotional silence, energetic withdrawal, the kind of silence that makes you question everything. You replayed conversations. You analyzed tone changes. You wondered how something that felt so divinely orchestrated could suddenly feel so distant. One moment he was open, present, almost vulnerable. The next, cold, distracted, gone. Why? Why does the divine masculine pull away when the connection becomes real? The surface answer is simple: fear. But that word is too small for what was really happening inside him. This wasn't just fear of commitment. It was fear of exposure. When the divine masculine meets his counterpart, he doesn't just feel attraction. He feels recognition. And recognition is destabilizing when a man has built his identity around control. You didn't just see his strengths. You saw his wounds. You saw the insecurity beneath the confidence, the doubt beneath the ambition, the tenderness beneath the stoicism. And that level of being seen can feel terrifying. Because when a man is seen deeply, he can no longer hide behind performance. So he pulled away. Not because the connection wasn't powerful, but because it was too powerful. Let's go deeper. Most divine masculines were not taught emotional fluency. They were taught strength, provision, logic, independence. Solve the problem, suppress the feeling, move forward. So when a connection awakens old childhood wounds, abandonment, rejection, not feeling good enough, his nervous system interprets love as threat. Not consciously, but instinctively. You may have felt closer than ever while inside he felt exposed, vulnerable, unprepared. Imagine this scenario. He feels himself falling in love, truly falling. Not casually, not strategically, but deeply. He senses that you matter, that losing you would hurt, that you could impact his future in a permanent way. And that realization triggers something primal. If I care this much, I can be hurt this much. So instead of leaning in, he leans back. Instead of communicating fear, he distances. Instead of admitting vulnerability, he chooses silence. Because silence feels safer than risk. You might have interpreted that silence as indifference. But indifference is loud. True detachment doesn't create energetic chaos. What you felt wasn't indifference. It was internal conflict. One part of him moving toward you, another part slamming on the brakes. And that push-pull dynamic created emotional whiplash. You'd have moments of closeness, deep conversation, eye contact that lingered, vulnerability slipping through the cracks. And just when you felt secure, he would retreat. No explanation, no closure, just distance. And you asked yourself, was it real? Did I imagine it? Here's the truth. The connection was real, but so were his wounds. And wounds don't disappear just because love appears. In fact, love exposes them. Let's talk about ego. The divine masculine ego is not arrogance in the traditional sense. It's protection. It's the identity he constructed to survive. The strong one, the capable one, the unshakable one. When you entered his life, that identity began to crack. You challenged him without trying. Your emotional depth forced him to feel things he had compartmentalized for years. Your intuition saw through his masks. And when a man realizes he cannot control how deeply he feels, that loss of control can be terrifying. So he regained control the only way he knew how. Distance. Silence. Withdrawal. From the outside, it may have looked like he moved on easily. Maybe he buried himself in work. Maybe he dated someone else. Maybe he acted unaffected. But avoidance is not healing. It's postponement. Have you ever noticed how often divine masculines enter rebound situations during separation? Not because the new connection is stronger, but because it's safer, less intense, less exposing. Intensity requires growth. Comfort requires nothing. And at that time, growth felt overwhelming. Another layer to this silence is shame. Yes, shame. Not being ready enough. Not being financially stable enough. Not being emotionally mature enough. Many divine masculines equate love with responsibility. And if he felt unstable in any area of his life, he may have believed he had no right to fully step into union. Instead of saying, "I'm scared I can't give you what you deserve," he said nothing. Instead of admitting, "I feel inadequate," he disappeared. Because vulnerability felt like weakness. And weakness felt unacceptable. You may have tried to reassure him, tried to hold space, tried to love him through it. But healing cannot be outsourced. He had to confront his own fears. And confrontation requires separation. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The runner phase is not about rejecting you. It's about rejecting the version of himself that feels unworthy. When he pulled away, he wasn't running from love. He was running from the mirror. You mirrored his potential. You mirrored his depth. You mirrored the man he could become. And if he wasn't ready to become that man yet, distance felt easier than transformation. Let me ask you, during the silence, what happened to you? Did you begin to heal? Did you confront your own attachment wounds? Did you learn to self-soothe instead of chase? Because while he was withdrawing physically, the universe was recalibrating both of you. Silence has purpose. It strips away illusion. It forces introspection. It reveals dependency. And it asks one brutal question. Is this love rooted in need or in growth? During the long silence, many divine feminines awaken spiritually. They detach from the outcome. They reclaim their identity. They stop overgiving. They stabilize. And interestingly, that stabilization creates pressure on the runner. Because when you stop chasing, he can no longer justify running. The dynamic shifts. The noise quiets. And he is left alone with himself. No distraction from your pursuit. No external blame. Just his thoughts. And in that solitude, something begins to unravel. The coping mechanisms stop working. The pride loses its satisfaction. The avoidance feels empty. He begins to miss not just you but how he felt around you. Seen, understood, inspired. The long silence wasn't the end of the story. It was the incubation period, the cocoon phase. Painful, confusing, necessary. Because if he had returned before confronting his fear, the cycle would have repeated. Union requires maturity, not just emotion. And maturity is forged in solitude. So if you're looking back at that long stretch of silence and wondering why it had to happen, understand this. He pulled away because the connection demanded growth. He pulled away because he wasn't yet aligned with the man you saw in him. He pulled away because loving you meant evolving. And evolution is uncomfortable. But here's the shift we're stepping into now. He is no longer in denial. The silence that once represented avoidance is transforming into preparation. The distance that once felt like rejection is revealing itself as refinement. He had to lose proximity to understand value. He had to sit in absence to recognize truth. And now, the man who ran is not the man who returns. Because silence changes people, especially when it forces them to face themselves. In the next part, we're going to explore the exact moment when avoidance stops working, when distraction fails, and when the divine masculine reaches his internal breaking point. Because that's where readiness begins. There comes a moment in every divine masculine's journey when the strategies that once protected him stop protecting him. The distractions lose their flavor. The ego loses its power. The silence loses its comfort. And what once felt like control begins to feel like emptiness. This is the breaking point. Not dramatic on the outside, but seismic on the inside. Because avoidance has an expiration date. For a while it works. He buries himself in productivity. He fills his calendar. He tells himself he's focused on more important things. He convinces himself that the connection was exaggerated, that emotions fade, that time heals everything. And maybe for a few weeks or months it feels manageable. Until it doesn't. Because you can suppress emotion, but you cannot delete truth. Imagine him alone at night. The world quiet. No notifications. No conversations. No movement. Just him. And in that stillness your presence returns. Not as fantasy but as memory. Not as obsession but as clarity. He remembers the way you looked at him when he wasn't performing. The way conversations flowed effortlessly. The way he felt both challenged and understood. And suddenly, the life he constructed to replace you feels thin. This is where the cracks widen. He may try dating someone new. On paper, she's easier, less intense, less spiritual, less triggering. But something feels off. There's chemistry but no recognition. There's comfort but no expansion. There's connection but no depth. And for the first time, he begins to realize that what he had with you wasn't replaceable. It wasn't just attraction. It was activation. You activated parts of him he didn't know existed. And now everything else feels muted. This is not romantic nostalgia. It's contrast. Contrast is brutal. Because when you experience something aligned, everything misaligned becomes obvious. At first, he may resist this realization. Pride whispers, "Move on." Ego says, "You made your choice." Fear says, "It's too late." But the heart grows louder. He begins noticing synchronicities. Your name appearing randomly. Songs that remind him of specific moments. Dreams that feel disturbingly vivid. Coincidence? Maybe. But when patterns repeat, denial weakens. Have you ever felt the energy spike unexpectedly? Like a sudden wave of emotion that didn't originate from you? That's often when he's thinking of you intensely. Because the breaking point isn't just intellectual. It's emotional collapse. The old identity he built, independent, detached, unaffected, starts crumbling. He realizes he wasn't as unbothered as he pretended. And here's the hardest part. He begins to see his role in the separation. Up until now, he may have blamed timing, circumstances, misunderstandings. But at the breaking point, self-awareness pierces through. He sees how he withdrew instead of communicating. How he deflected instead of admitting fear. How he chose comfort over courage. Accountability is humbling. And humility cracks the ego. This stage can feel heavy for him. Restlessness. Irritability. A subtle dissatisfaction he can't quite name. He might achieve something externally, a promotion, a milestone, attention from others, and still feel incomplete. Because success without alignment feels hollow. He may sit in a crowded room and feel alone. He may laugh with friends but sense something missing. And slowly he connects the dots. It wasn't you that overwhelmed him. It was the growth required to keep you. And growth is no longer optional. The breaking point often arrives quietly. Maybe he hears a story about regret, someone losing the love of their life because of pride. Maybe he experiences a small personal failure that exposes vulnerability. Maybe he simply reaches emotional exhaustion from pretending he doesn't care. But something shifts. The question changes from, "Can I live without her?" to, "Why am I choosing to?" That question is powerful. Because once he acknowledges that the separation was a choice rooted in fear, not destiny, he regains agency. And with agency comes responsibility. Let's explore something deeper. Many divine masculines carry a subconscious belief that love equals loss of freedom, that commitment equals restriction, that vulnerability equals weakness. But at the breaking point, he begins to question those narratives. Was he really free during separation? Or was he emotionally confined? Was he truly strong in silence? Or was he avoiding discomfort? He begins to see that running didn't empower him. It limited him. And that realization stings. There's often a moment, subtle but profound, when he stops resisting the connection internally. Not yet reaching out. Not yet taking action. But internally surrendering. Surrender doesn't mean defeat. It means truth wins. He stops arguing with his feelings. He stops minimizing the significance. He stops pretending you were just another chapter. And in that surrender, clarity emerges. Clarity about what he wants. Clarity about what he lost. Clarity about what must change if union is ever to happen. This stage can also trigger grief. Yes, grief. Grief over time lost. Over words unsaid. Over fear-driven decisions. And grief softens a man. It strips bravado. It invites reflection. He might revisit old messages, reread conversations, replay moments where he could have chosen differently. Not to torture himself, but to understand. Understanding leads to integration. Integration leads to readiness. Here's something important. The breaking point is not about desperation. It's not about loneliness driving him back. It's about alignment becoming unavoidable. When avoidance fails, truth stands alone. And truth says, this connection matters. No more distractions. No more excuses. No more waiting for perfect timing. He may not immediately act, but internally the war ends. And when internal war ends, external movement begins. You might notice subtle signs. An unexpected social media interaction. A sudden increase in telepathic dreams. A mutual friend mentioning him out of nowhere. Energy precedes action. Always. The breaking point transforms him from runner to thinker. From avoider to reflector. From resistant to receptive. And here's the profound shift. He no longer sees union as threat. He begins seeing it as growth. As partnership. As expansion. The fear doesn't vanish instantly, but it no longer dominates. Instead of asking, what if this fails? He starts asking, what if this succeeds? That question changes everything. Because fear imagines loss, but readiness imagines possibility. So if you're feeling a subtle steadiness lately, less chaos, less emotional turbulence, that may be because he's no longer fighting internally. The storm inside him is settling. The breaking point already happened. Now comes the rebuilding. And in the next part, we'll explore the ego death and awakening that follows this collapse. Because when the divine masculine truly faces himself, he doesn't just return. He transforms. After the breaking point comes the dismantling. Not of his life. Not of his identity entirely. But of the version of himself that could not sustain sacred love. This is the phase many never see. Because ego death does not announce itself publicly. It happens internally, quietly, often painfully, and it changes a man forever. Let's be clear about something. Ego death is not humiliation. It is not self-hatred. It is not collapse into weakness. It is the shedding of a false self. For most of his life, the divine masculine built armor. armor made of achievements, logic, emotional restraint, independence, pride, even charm. This armor worked. It protected him from rejection, from vulnerability, from disappointment, but it also prevented intimacy. When he met you, the armor cracked. When he lost you, it shattered. And at the breaking point, he realizes something terrifying. The identity he relied on is incomplete. That realization is destabilizing. Because if he is not the emotionally detached, self-contained man he thought he was, then who is he? This is where the awakening begins. Ego death often feels like disorientation. He may question past decisions, reevaluate his priorities, reconsider beliefs he once held as facts. He might sit alone and think, why did I react that way? Why was vulnerability so threatening? Why did I equate love with loss of control? These are not small questions. They are foundational. And when a man begins questioning his foundations, transformation becomes inevitable. Let's talk about the mirror. You were never just a romantic interest. You were a mirror. You reflected his depth back to him, his potential, his emotional capacity, even his unhealed wounds. And when he pulled away, he thought he was escaping discomfort. But what he was actually avoiding was self-confrontation. Now there is no escape. Because silence amplifies reflection. In this phase, he begins seeing patterns. Maybe he recognizes that he withdraws whenever things get serious. Maybe he realizes he has a history of emotionally unavailable relationships. Maybe he understands that his fear of abandonment caused him to abandon first. Pattern recognition is awakening. And it's rarely comfortable. He may feel waves of regret. Not self-pity. Not dramatic despair. But quiet acknowledgement. I see what I did. That sentence alone marks maturity. Before he justified. Now he understands. Before he deflected. Now he reflects. And reflection leads to humility. Humility is the doorway to real masculine strength. Because strength is not dominance. It is accountability. This is the stage where he confronts childhood imprints. Perhaps he grew up in an environment where emotions were dismissed, where vulnerability was punished, where love felt conditional. If, as a child, he learned that expressing fear led to criticism, he learned to suppress fear. If expressing sadness led to being told to man up, he learned to bury sadness. And those suppressed emotions don't disappear. They accumulate. Until someone like you triggers them. You didn't create his wounds. You revealed them. And revelation forces choice. Continue suppressing or heal. Ego death is choosing healing. It's admitting, I am not as emotionally evolved as I thought. I hurt someone I care about. I ran because I was afraid. Those admissions are not weakness. They are rebirth. Because once the false identity dissolves, something authentic can emerge. Let's explore another layer. During this awakening, the divine masculine often experiences a shift in perception about you. Before, he may have minimized the connection to protect himself. Now he sees it clearly. He sees how safe he felt in your presence. How inspired he felt by your depth. How challenged he felt in a way that pushed him to grow. He begins understanding that you were not asking him to be perfect. You were asking him to be present. And presence requires emotional availability, which requires courage. This is the moment where he stops viewing union as pressure and starts viewing it as partnership. He begins to imagine what it would look like to show up differently, not defensively, not half invested, but fully. And that imagination creates motivation. Because once a man tastes emotional clarity, he cannot comfortably return to denial. There's also a spiritual dimension here. Many divine masculines are not consciously spiritual at first. But awakening does not require labels. It requires awareness. He may begin noticing synchronicities more consciously. He may feel guided toward introspection through books, conversations, even random life events. Sometimes it's subtle. A podcast episode about emotional intelligence. A conversation with a friend who unexpectedly shares vulnerability. A moment of crisis that forces introspection. Awakening rarely looks mystical on the surface. It looks like responsibility. He starts regulating his reactions. He starts observing his triggers instead of projecting them. He starts choosing response over impulse. That shift alone transforms relational dynamics. And here's something profound. When ego dissolves, comparison dissolves. He no longer evaluates you based on pride. He evaluates himself based on integrity. Instead of asking, "Did she need too much?" he asks, "Was I giving enough?" Instead of thinking, "She was intense," he thinks, "I was guarded." The narrative changes. And when the narrative changes, behavior follows. Let's pause for a moment. This phase can feel slow externally. You may not see immediate movement. But internally, tectonic plates are shifting. The man who once resisted emotional depth is now integrating it. The man who once feared vulnerability is now practicing it internally. The man who once avoided accountability is now embracing it. And this is critical. Union without ego death recreates the same cycle. Union after ego death creates stability, because ego seeks validation. But awakened masculinity seeks alignment. Alignment is not loud. It's steady. He no longer wants to win arguments. He wants to understand. He no longer wants to appear strong. He wants to be authentic. He no longer wants to control the narrative. He wants to co-create it. This transformation doesn't erase his personality. It refines it. He's still masculine, still grounded, still decisive. But now his strength includes softness. His confidence includes vulnerability. His independence includes partnership. And that balance is what makes union sustainable. You may feel this awakening energetically before you see it physically. A sudden sense of peace about him. A release of resentment. An intuitive knowing that something inside him has matured. That's not imagination. That's resonance. Because when one twin integrates shadow, the energetic field stabilizes. Ego death is not the end of him. It is the beginning of the man you always sensed he could become. And in the next part, we'll explore how this awakening translates into emotional maturity. How accountability becomes action, how reflection becomes communication, and how readiness begins to take tangible form. Because awakening is internal, but union requires expression. Awakening changes awareness, but emotional maturity changes behavior. And this is where everything becomes real. Because it's one thing for the divine masculine to recognize his patterns in solitude. It's another thing entirely for him to embody growth and connection. Part 5 is about embodiment. It's about the moment reflection turns into responsibility. After ego death and inner awakening, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. He stops reacting from wounded instinct and starts responding from conscious choice. Before, when conflict appeared, he withdrew. Before, when emotions intensified, he deflected. Before, when vulnerability surfaced, he shut down. Now, he pauses. That pause is maturity. Maturity is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up in restraint, in listening, in measured action. Imagine this shift internally. Where he once felt attacked, he now feels curious. Where he once felt overwhelmed, he now feels accountable. Where he once blamed, he now reflects. He begins asking himself questions in real time. Why did that trigger me? Am I reacting from fear or from truth? Is my pride speaking or my heart? These questions mark evolution. Because emotional maturity is not about suppressing feelings. It's about understanding them. And for many divine masculines, this is unfamiliar territory. They were conditioned to solve problems externally, not internally. To fix situations, not examine emotions. But now, he understands that you were never asking him to fix everything. You were asking him to show up emotionally. And that requires self-regulation. Self-regulation is one of the clearest signs of readiness. He no longer escalates quickly. He no longer retreats automatically. He no longer feels the need to dominate or disappear. Instead, he remains present. Presence is power. Let's explore how this looks in action. Before maturity, a difficult conversation might have felt threatening. He might have interpreted your emotional honesty as criticism. His nervous system would activate. Defensiveness would rise. Now, when emotion surfaces, he doesn't immediately protect his ego. He listens. Not to respond, but to understand. That shift alone changes the entire dynamic. Because when a man feels safe enough within himself, he doesn't perceive vulnerability as danger. He sees it as depth. Another layer of emotional maturity is accountability without collapse. In the past, admitting fault may have felt unbearable, threatened his identity. It exposed imperfection. Now he can say, "I see how I hurt you. I wasn't ready then. I handled that poorly," without spiraling into shame. Because maturity separates behavior from identity. He understands that making a mistake does not make him unworthy. It makes him human. And that understanding builds emotional stability. Let's pause here. Do you notice the difference between regret and responsibility? Regret looks backward and stays there. Responsibility looks backward and adjusts forward. The divine masculine who is ready for union does not just feel remorse. He changes patterns. He communicates differently. He prioritizes differently. He chooses differently. He no longer seeks temporary validation. He seeks alignment. Alignment with his values. Alignment with his truth. Alignment with the future he envisions. And in that alignment, you are not a fantasy. You are a partner. That's a critical distinction. Immature love idealizes. Mature love integrates. He no longer views you as an emotional high or spiritual mystery. He sees you as someone to build with. And building requires consistency. Consistency is one of the strongest indicators of readiness. Before, his energy may have felt unpredictable. Hot and cold. Present and absent. Engaged and detached. Now there is steadiness. Steadiness in communication. Steadiness in intention. Steadiness in effort. Because emotional maturity eliminates internal contradiction. He is no longer split between fear and desire. He chooses. And once he chooses, he commits internally first. Let's explore masculine strength for a moment. For a long time, he equated strength with stoicism, with being unaffected, with not needing anyone. But now he redefines strength. Strength becomes the ability to stay present during discomfort, to remain open during conflict, to express emotion without feeling diminished, to commit without feeling trapped. That redefinition changes everything. Because true masculine energy is not avoidance. It is grounded leadership. And leadership in union does not mean control. It means direction with integrity. He begins thinking long-term, not just about how he feels in the moment, but about what he wants to create. He evaluates his habits, his communication style, his emotional availability, not from insecurity, but from intention. He asks himself, am I the man capable of sustaining what I desire? That question transforms boys into men. And when he can answer yes honestly, not perfectly but consciously, union becomes viable. Another sign of emerging maturity is emotional transparency. He may not become poetic overnight. He may not suddenly articulate every feeling flawlessly, but there is effort. There is willingness. He might say, I struggle to express this, but I want to try. That sentence alone is evolution. Because willingness creates connection. Perfection does not. Let's address something important. Emotional maturity does not mean he never feels fear again. It means fear no longer dictates behavior. He may still feel nervous about reaching out. Still feel vulnerable admitting love. Still feel exposed committing deeply. But now, courage outweighs avoidance. And courage is not the absence of fear. It is action despite it. You may sense this shift energetically first. Less turbulence. Less unpredictability. More grounded energy. Because when a man integrates his emotions instead of suppressing them, his presence stabilizes. And stability feels safe. Safety allows union. There's also a shift in how he views you. Before, he may have projected insecurities onto you, assumed intentions, misinterpreted emotions. Now, he gives you the benefit of clarity. He trusts your words. He trusts your heart. Because he trusts himself more. And trust in self eliminates projection. Projection is a symptom of immaturity. Clarity is a symptom of growth. He no longer needs to test you. Withdraw to see if you chase. Create distance to gauge your reaction. Because he understands that secure connection does not require games. It requires presence. And presence is a choice. This is the stage where union becomes possible not because passion reignites, but because stability emerges. Passion without maturity creates chaos. Passion with maturity creates partnership. And partnership is what sustains love. So if you are sensing a calm shift, if you feel less anxiety about him, if you intuitively know he is different internally, it may be because he is no longer wrestling with himself. He is aligning. He is integrating. He is preparing not to revisit the past but to build something new. And in the next part, we will explore the energetic shift that happens when both energies stabilize, how telepathic connection intensifies, how the push-pull dissolves, and how union begins to feel not chaotic but inevitable. Because once emotional maturity emerges, destiny no longer feels like fantasy, feels like timing. There is a moment in the twin flame journey when the energy changes so subtly yet so undeniably that you almost question whether it's real. The anxiety that once gripped your chest softens. The obsessive thoughts lose their urgency. The emotional highs and lows even out into something steady. And what replaces chaos is not indifference. It's calm. This is the energetic shift toward union. For so long the connection may have felt intense, electric, overwhelming. The push and pull dynamic created friction. One person leaning in while the other pulled back. One awakening while the other resisted. It was magnetic but unstable. But union energy does not feel frantic. It feels grounded. Let's explore why. When the divine masculine integrates his ego and steps into emotional maturity, his nervous system stabilizes. And because twin flame connections operate on energetic resonance, his internal stability influences the shared field between you. You feel it. Not because he told you. Not because he posted something. But because the energy no longer feels jagged. Feels aligned. Have you noticed that you're no longer trying to manifest him constantly? You're not scripting messages in your head. You're not checking tarot readings obsessively. You're not scanning social media for signs. That doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means your body feels safe. And safety is the foundation of union. When the push and pull dissolves, it's because neither energy is chasing or running anymore. You're both standing still. And stillness is powerful. Stillness is not stagnation. It is balance. Think about it. Chaos thrives on imbalance. If one person is anxious and the other avoidant, the dynamic feeds itself. Anxiety triggers avoidance. Avoidance triggers anxiety. But when anxiety calms and avoidance dissolves, the cycle collapses. That collapse makes space. Space for clarity. Space for choice. Space for intentional movement. The energetic shift toward union often includes an intensification of subtle connection. Dreams may become more vivid. You may feel sudden waves of emotion that don't originate from your current environment. You might think of him unexpectedly and feel a warmth rather than longing. This is not obsession. It's alignment. When both energies rise to similar frequency, when both have done inner work, the connection feels less like craving and more like presence. There is a difference between missing someone and knowing someone. Missing feels sharp. Knowing feels steady. And right now, the energy feels like knowing. You may also notice synchronicities increasing, but without the desperation attached to them. You see his name somewhere and smile instead of spiral. You hear a song that reminds you of him and feel peace instead of pain. Why? Because attachment has loosened. And ironically, detachment accelerates union energy. Let's talk about telepathic pull. In twin flame dynamics, energetic communication often precedes physical contact. During separation, telepathic connection can feel chaotic. Intense longing, emotional spikes, restless nights. But when both energies stabilize, telepathy becomes calmer. Instead of frantic longing, it feels like gentle awareness. You may suddenly sense that he is thinking about you, not from anxiety but from warmth. You may feel his presence during meditation or quiet moments, not as intrusion but as familiarity. This is what happens when resistance fades. Resistance creates friction. Surrender creates flow. And flow is the natural state of aligned love. Here's something important. Union energy does not feel like fireworks. Feels like gravity. Unavoidable. Steady. Pulling both of you toward center. During the runner-chaser phase, gravity was distorted by fear. Now gravity reasserts itself. Because when two energies align, movement becomes natural. You don't have to force gravity. You don't have to convince it to work. Simply does. You may also feel less urgency about timing. Before you may have thought, it has to happen now or never. Now there is patience. Not passive waiting but confident knowing. That shift is critical. Because desperation repels. Confidence attracts. The divine masculine, having stabilized internally, no longer emits chaotic signals. His energy feels direct. Even if he hasn't physically reached out yet, the intention is different. Before, he might have thought about contacting you from loneliness. Now, he thinks about contacting you from clarity. That distinction changes the energetic frequency. Clarity feels grounded. Loneliness feels grasping. Union cannot be built on grasping. It must be built on choice. You might also notice that you are less reactive to external triggers. If someone mentions him, you remain centered. If time passes without contact, you don't spiral. Because your identity is no longer fused with the outcome. You have reclaimed yourself. And self-reclamation aligns timelines. Let's go deeper. When both counterparts release control, the universe no longer needs to create chaos to force growth. In earlier stages, conflict and separation were catalysts. Now calm becomes catalyst. Because growth has already occurred. The push-pull dynamic dissolves when both parties stop unconsciously reenacting old wounds. He no longer withdraws at intimacy. You no longer chase at distance. Instead, both energies stand in grounded awareness. And from that place, reunion becomes sustainable. There is also a noticeable shift in how you perceive him. You stop seeing him as the runner. You stop identifying yourself as the chaser. Those labels dissolve. What remains are two individuals who have grown. And growth neutralizes polarity extremes. The masculine energy becomes less rigid. The feminine energy becomes less anxious. Balance emerges. Balance feels peaceful. Peace feels magnetic. This is why union energy often feels anticlimactic in the best way. It doesn't feel like drama. Feels like relief. Like exhaling after holding your breath for years. Have you felt that exhale? That quiet certainty that something is aligning behind the scenes? That's the energetic shift. You might not know when he will reach out. You might not know how reunion will unfold. But you feel that it's no longer impossible. Feels probable. And probability is powerful. Because once something feels probable, you stop resisting it. You stop forcing it. You allow it. Allowing is magnetism. The divine masculine, now emotionally integrated, no longer emits conflicting signals into the field. His energy says one thing: I am ready. And when readiness meets receptivity, timelines converge. But remember, union energy does not rush. It unfolds. Like a tide coming in. Slowly. Inevitably. You don't see every inch of movement. But suddenly the shoreline looks different. That's where you are now. The shoreline has shifted. The tide is rising. And in the next part we will explore why he is no longer waiting. Why clarity has replaced hesitation. Why regret has transformed into decision. And why this time his movement will not be temporary. Because when a man moves from alignment, he does not step halfway. He steps forward. There was a time when he told himself, maybe later. Later when he felt more stable. Later when he had more money. Later when the timing was right. Later when he was ready. But something inside him has shifted. And now later no longer feels safe. 1. The illusion of time. For a long time, the divine masculine believed he had time. Time to figure it out. Time to avoid the hard conversations. Time to grow without committing. Time to circle back when it felt convenient. But here's the truth. Time can be a comfort and a trap. He once saw separation as a pause button. Now he understands it was a mirror. The more he tried to postpone the connection, the louder it echoed within him. Have you ever noticed how the more you delay something important, the heavier it becomes? That's where he found himself. What once felt like control now felt like loss. And that realization changed everything. 2. The fear of regret replaces the fear of commitment. Before, his biggest fear was commitment. Commitment meant vulnerability. Commitment meant responsibility. Commitment meant being seen completely. and being seen felt dangerous. But now a new fear has emerged. The fear of regret. The fear of waking up 5 years from now wondering, what if I had chosen love? The fear of seeing you with someone else and realizing he let divine alignment slip through his fingers. The fear of knowing he ran from something sacred. And regret is heavier than commitment. Regret lingers. Regret haunts. Regret whispers at night. He used to fear losing his freedom. Now he fears losing you. That shift is everything. 3. Clarity has replaced confusion. There was a time when he genuinely didn't understand what he felt. The connection overwhelmed him, triggered him, cracked him open. And instead of interpreting that intensity as sacred, he labeled it as chaos. But after the ego softened, after the silence stretched long enough, after distractions failed, clarity arrived. Not as fireworks, not as drama, but as quiet knowing. You are not random. This is not coincidence. This is not just chemistry. This is alignment. Clarity is calm. Clarity doesn't panic. Clarity chooses. And when a man chooses with clarity instead of impulse, that decision becomes unshakable. 4. He understands the sacredness of the connection. Before, he saw the connection emotionally. Now he sees it spiritually. He notices the synchronicities. He notices the inner growth that only happened because of you. He notices that every path he walks somehow circled back to the same realization. You are not just a person in his life. You are a catalyst. You activated parts of him that no one else could reach. You challenged him. You inspired him. You forced him to confront himself. And now he understands something profound. Not everyone gets to experience this kind of connection. Some people live entire lifetimes without encountering a mirror soul. He almost lost it. That awareness creates urgency. Not desperation, but sacred urgency. 5. He no longer wants temporary love. He tried distraction. He tried normal relationships. He tried surface-level conversations. He tried emotional avoidance. But once you've experienced depth, shallowness feels suffocating. Once you've tasted soul recognition, small talk feels empty. He may have smiled. He may have gone on dates. He may have convinced himself he was fine. But inside, comparison was constant. No one reflected him like you did. No one challenged him the way you did. No one saw through him the way you did. And he realized something difficult. He wasn't avoiding commitment. He was avoiding transformation. Now that he has transformed, he no longer fears depth. He craves it. 6. He has integrated his shadow. Waiting was easier when he was fragmented. When parts of him were still running the show. The wounded child. The abandoned teenager. The prideful ego. But after facing his shadow, he feels more whole. He understands his triggers. He recognizes his patterns. He no longer blames you for activating them. And when a man becomes internally aligned, external alignment becomes possible. He doesn't feel split anymore. He doesn't feel confused anymore. He doesn't feel torn between fear and love. Now love feels stronger. 7. He knows union requires action. Here's the biggest shift. He understands that union is not passive. Before, he waited for the right sign. He waited for the right moment. He waited for fate to handle everything. Now he understands something powerful. Divine timing doesn't replace human choice. Yes, the universe aligns. Yes, synchronicities guide. Yes, destiny exists. But action seals it. He knows that if he wants union, he must move toward it. Communication, accountability, consistency. Union is co-created. And he is ready to participate. 8. He feels the energetic window opening. There are moments on the twin flame journey when energy feels stagnant. And then there are moments when everything accelerates. He feels that acceleration now. Dreams intensify. Memories resurface vividly. Intuition becomes louder. It's as if something inside him whispers, now. Not next year. Not someday. Now. Have you felt it too? That subtle calm before reconnection? That sense that the silence has changed? Energy doesn't lie. And he feels the opening. 9. He understands that love is strength. For a long time, vulnerability felt weak. Expressing emotion felt risky. Admitting love felt exposing. But true masculine strength isn't dominance. It's presence. It's the courage to say, I was wrong. I was scared. I choose you. He has redefined strength within himself. And once strength and softness coexist, union becomes possible. He doesn't feel threatened by his feelings anymore. He feels empowered by them. 10. He is choosing consciously. This is not impulse. This is not loneliness. This is not ego validation. This is not fear of being alone. This is conscious choice. He has evaluated the past. He has processed the pain. He has sat in the silence. And after all of it, he still arrives at the same conclusion. You are worth it. The growth was worth it. The waiting was worth it. The transformation was worth it. And now he no longer sees waiting as growth. He sees choosing as growth. A question for you. If he shows up steady, if he communicates clearly, if he takes accountability, if he chooses you without hesitation, will you recognize him? Because sometimes when the divine masculine evolves, he no longer looks like the version you were attached to. He feels calmer, grounded, certain. Are you ready for that version? The divine masculine is no longer waiting because he understands something profound. Love is not something you delay when you are ready. Love is what makes you ready. And now, he's ready. Not perfectly healed. Not flawless. But aligned. When we say the divine masculine is ready for union, it's important to pause and ask, what does ready actually mean? Does it mean he has no wounds left? Does it mean he will never get triggered again? Does it mean the journey suddenly becomes effortless? No. Ready does not mean perfect. Ready means willing. Willing to stay. Willing to communicate. Willing to choose love even when it requires growth. Union is not the fairy tale ending to the twin flame journey. It is the next level of responsibility. And many people misunderstand that. 1. Ready means emotionally available. In the past, he may have felt intense emotions, but intensity is not the same as availability. He felt the connection. He felt the pull. He felt the longing. But when it came to consistency, when it came to staying present during conflict, when it came to vulnerability, he retreated. Being ready for union means he no longer disappears when emotions get uncomfortable. It means when something triggers him, he doesn't shut down for weeks. It means he doesn't avoid hard conversations. It means he doesn't punish you with silence. Emotional availability looks simple, but it is powerful. Sounds like, I need a moment, but I'm not going anywhere. That triggered something in me. Let's talk about it. I feel scared, but I want to work through this. Do you see the difference? Before, fear led to distance. Now, fear leads to communication. That's readiness. 2. Ready means accountability. In separation, blame often dominates. It's not the right time. You're too intense. This is too complicated. I just need space. But space without accountability is avoidance. A divine masculine ready for union takes ownership. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a performative apology. But in grounded honesty. He can say, I wasn't ready before. I hurt you. I ran because I was scared. And here's the key. He doesn't say it to win you back. He says it because it's true. Accountability shifts the energy of the entire connection. When both people own their patterns, the power struggle dissolves. Union cannot exist where ego is still fighting for dominance. Readiness means the ego no longer needs to be right. It values connection more than control. 3. Ready means consistency over intensity. The early stages of a twin flame journey are often explosive. Passion, chemistry, magnetism, late-night conversations, synchronicities everywhere. But intensity is not stability. Union requires consistency. Consistency is less flashy, but far more sacred. Showing up when you said you would. It's following through. It's building trust through actions, not just words. Before, he may have overwhelmed you with emotion one day and withdrawn the next. Hot and cold. Present and distant. Certain and confused. But readiness means steadiness. Not perfection. Not monotony. but reliability. Because love that cannot be trusted cannot be built upon. Union is built brick by brick. And consistency is the foundation. 4. Ready means he has a vision for partnership. When he wasn't ready, he may have wanted the connection, but not the responsibility. He wanted the feeling of you. He wanted the comfort of you. He wanted the inspiration of you. But he hadn't thought about building with you. Now he has a vision. Not necessarily a detailed life plan, but a conscious awareness that union is co-creation. He thinks in terms of we, not just me. He considers, how do we grow together? How do we support each other's purpose? How do we create something lasting? Union is not just romance. It's partnership. It's leadership balanced with collaboration. True divine masculine energy leads. Not through control but through stability. He becomes someone you can lean on. And he wants to be. 5. Ready means he respects your boundaries. During separation, boundaries can feel like rejection. If you pulled back, he may have interpreted it as abandonment. If you demanded clarity, he may have felt pressured. But growth changes perception. Now he understands that boundaries are not walls. They are structure. A man ready for union respects your standards. He doesn't see them as threats. He sees them as guidelines for alignment. If you say, I need consistency, he listens. If you say, I can't do this unless it's mutual, he steps up, or he steps away respectfully. Because readiness includes maturity, and maturity honors limits. 6. Ready means he has faced his fear of vulnerability. Vulnerability is the final initiation. For many divine masculines, strength was defined by stoicism, by emotional control, by independence, by self-sufficiency. But union requires openness. He must allow himself to be seen fully. Not just the confident version, not just the successful version, but the uncertain version too. The version that doubts, the version that fears loss, the version that needs reassurance. Being ready means he no longer hides those parts. He trusts you enough to reveal them. And more importantly, he trusts himself enough to survive that exposure. 7. Ready does not mean there will be no challenges. Let's dissolve the fantasy right now. Union is not the end of growth. It is deeper growth. Triggers may still arise. Old patterns may occasionally surface. External stressors may test the bond. But the difference is this. He no longer runs at the first sign of discomfort. He stays. He communicates. He reflects. He adjusts. Readiness is not the absence of conflict. It is the commitment to work through it. That is real partnership. 8. Ready means he chooses love daily. Union is not secured by one grand gesture. It is sustained by daily choice. Choosing patience. Choosing understanding. Choosing effort. Love becomes a practice, not just a feeling. Before, he may have loved you emotionally but resisted you practically. Now love becomes actionable. He doesn't just feel it. He demonstrates it. Through time. Through presence. Through reliability. And that kind of love feels different. Feels safe. 9. Union is energetic alignment, not just physical reunion. Many people focus only on the physical reunion. The message. The phone call. The meeting. But true union begins energetically. When both have stabilized internally. When chasing has stopped. When resentment has softened. When self-worth has strengthened. If you still feel desperate, something is incomplete. If he still feels avoidant, something is incomplete. Union energy feels calm. It doesn't scream. It doesn't panic. It doesn't demand. It flows. And when he is ready, you will feel that grounded shift. It won't feel chaotic. It will feel clear. 10. The mirror question for you. Now let's turn the mirror gently toward you. If he arrives steady, if he communicates openly, if he offers consistency, if he chooses you consciously, are you ready to receive that? Because sometimes we become attached to the struggle. We become attached to longing, to waiting, to proving. But union requires receptivity. It requires softness, trust, emotional availability on both sides. Are you still holding resentment? Are you still testing him? Are you still guarding your heart so tightly that nothing can enter? Union is not about one person evolving. It is about two people meeting at the same level. The divine masculine being ready for union does not mean the journey ends. It means a new chapter begins. One built on consciousness instead of chaos, on clarity instead of confusion, on choice instead of fear. But this shift doesn't just change him, changes you. In the next part, we're going to explore what this evolution means for the divine feminine, because when he rises, she must also stand in her power. Union is mutual, and the energy must meet in the middle. So now we arrive at a powerful turning point. The divine masculine is ready. He's no longer confused. He's no longer hiding. He's no longer waiting. But here is the deeper question. What does this shift mean for you? Because union is never one-sided. If he has evolved, you must meet him there. And this is where many divine feminines experience their final initiation. 1. Letting go of the old story. For a long time, you may have identified with the waiting, the longing, the aching, the wondering when he would finally awaken. Your strength was built in the separation. You learned self-love. You built independence. You healed abandonment wounds. You reclaimed your worth. But sometimes, without realizing it, the identity of the one who waits becomes comfortable, becomes familiar. If he shows up different, calmer, clearer, grounded, will you still see him through the lens of who he used to be? Or will you allow him to be who he is now? This is crucial, because if you keep reacting to his past version, you block the present one. You cannot receive a healed man while holding on to a wounded narrative. 2. Releasing control. During separation, control can feel like safety. You learn to detach. You learn to pull back. You learn to stop chasing. And that growth was necessary. But there is a subtle difference between detachment and defensiveness. When he was inconsistent, you tightened your boundaries. When he was avoidant, you became self-contained. When he was unclear, you demanded clarity from within yourself. Now that he is ready, can you soften? Not collapse. Not abandon your standards, but soften. Because union requires receptivity. Control says, I'll believe it when I see it. Trust says, I'm open to seeing it. Which energy are you holding? 3. Are you ready for stability? Here's something rarely discussed. Sometimes the divine feminine becomes addicted to intensity. The highs and lows. The telepathic longing. The spiritual drama. The push and pull created adrenaline. Created obsession. It created movement. But union energy feels calm. Stable. Grounded. Predictable in the healthiest way. And sometimes calm can feel unfamiliar, even boring to a nervous system conditioned to chaos. So ask yourself honestly, are you ready for peace? Are you ready for a love that doesn't keep you guessing? Because when he shows up consistent, the dynamic changes. There is no more chasing. There is no more proving. There is simply building. And building requires patience. 4. Holding boundaries without armor. Growth does not mean lowering your standards. It means refining them. If he returns ready, your boundaries should remain, but without hostility. There is a difference between, I won't tolerate inconsistency, and, you hurt me before, so I will never fully trust you again. One is a boundary. The other is armor. Armor blocks intimacy. Boundaries protect intimacy. If he demonstrates change, can you allow trust to rebuild? Trust does not happen overnight. But it must be possible. Union cannot thrive in constant suspicion. 5. Receiving instead of overgiving. Many divine feminines are natural nurturers. You gave patience. You gave understanding. You gave emotional depth. Sometimes you gave more than was reciprocated. But now the dynamic shifts. If he is stepping into leadership and accountability, you must allow him to give, to initiate, to plan, to show up. Are you comfortable receiving? Receiving love. Receiving effort. Receiving consistency. Sometimes giving feels powerful because it keeps you in control. Receiving requires vulnerability. It requires allowing someone else to meet you. Can you let him? 6. Releasing resentment. Separation leaves scars. Moments of confusion. Moments of heartbreak. Moments when you questioned everything. Those emotions were real. But if you carry them into union unchanged, they become silent sabotage. Unspoken resentment creates distance even in closeness. If he apologizes sincerely, will you let the past stay in the past? Forgiveness does not erase memory. It releases emotional charge. And union requires emotional neutrality toward the old pain. You cannot punish him for who he used to be if he has genuinely evolved. Growth must be honored. On both sides. 7. Standing in your worth without testing him. When he returns ready, there may be a temptation to test him. To pull back slightly. To delay responses. To see how much effort he makes. This is understandable. But it's also fear. If he is consistent, let him be consistent. If he is clear, meet clarity with clarity. You do not need to create obstacles to confirm his growth. Healthy love does not require games. It requires alignment. Your power is not in withholding. Your power is in discernment. Observe his actions. Feel his energy. But do not sabotage what you prayed for. 8. Allowing the masculine to lead. In imbalance, the divine feminine often overcompensates. She initiates conversations. She seeks clarity. She pushes the relationship forward. Now, if he is ready, the dynamic must recalibrate. Divine masculine energy thrives in purpose. It wants to move forward, to provide stability, to create direction. Allow space for that. Leadership does not mean dominance. It means initiative. If he steps forward, step with him, not ahead of him. Union is a dance. And balance requires rhythm. 9. Becoming emotionally available again. During separation, you may have shut parts of your heart down. To survive. To cope. To heal. But now, if he is emotionally available, you must be too. Not guarded. Not distant. Not hyper-independent. Emotionally available means you express needs calmly. You share fears honestly. You allow closeness without anticipating abandonment. It means trusting that if conflict arises, it can be resolved, not escaped. Are you ready to love without preparing for loss? That is the final test. 10. Meeting him as an equal. The old dynamic may have placed you in the awakened role. You understood the connection first. You felt it deeper first. You processed it sooner. But now he has caught up. Union requires equality. Not teacher and student. Not awakened and asleep. Not pursuer and runner. Two sovereign individuals choosing each other. Can you release the identity of being the more conscious one? Because partnership demands humility on both sides. Growth is not a competition. It is convergence. A powerful reflection. If he stands before you grounded, accountable, and clear, will you open your heart without fear? Will you let love feel simple? Will you trust that what you asked the universe for is now here? Sometimes the final step in the twin flame journey is not convincing him to choose you. It is allowing yourself to be chosen. Fully. Without shrinking. Without suspicion. Without self-protection blocking intimacy. The divine masculine being ready for union is not just his victory. It is yours too. Because his evolution reflects yours. But there is one final truth we must understand. Union happens not when one chases. Not when one awakens. But when both rise simultaneously. In the final part, we will bring this journey together with a powerful message about divine timing, conscious love, and what happens when two healed energies finally meet. The moment is closer than you think. Are you ready? So here we are. After the silence. After the running. After the ego deaths. After the sleepless nights and spiritual awakenings. The divine masculine is no longer waiting. He's ready. And so are you. But before we close this journey, let's understand something deeply important. Union is not a reward. It is a responsibility. It is not the end of the story. It is the conscious beginning of a new one. 1. Union is not a fairy tale. It is a decision. For so long, you may have imagined reunion as a cinematic moment. The message. The confession. The embrace. The words you waited years to hear. And yes, those moments may happen. But what truly defines union is not the emotional high. It is the decision that follows. the decision to build, to stay, to grow together, to face life side by side. Real union is quiet at first. It doesn't scream. It settles. It feels like two nervous systems exhaling at the same time. No more chasing. No more testing. No more proving. Just presence. And presence is powerful. 2. Divine timing was never against you. There were moments when you questioned everything. Why is this taking so long? Why would I meet him if we weren't meant to be together? Why does love feel like a lesson? But divine timing was never punishment. It was preparation. If union had happened earlier, would it have survived? When he was still defensive? When you were still anxious? When both of you were reacting instead of responding? It would have collapsed under immaturity. Separation refined you. It stripped away codependency. It burned through ego. It forced self-awareness. What felt like delay was alignment. And now you can see it. The timing wasn't late. It was exact. 3. When both rise, everything changes. Union doesn't happen when one person is ready. It happens when both are. When the divine masculine steps into grounded leadership, and the divine feminine stands in receptive power, the polarity becomes harmonious instead of chaotic. Masculine energy provides direction. Feminine energy provides flow. Masculine energy protects. Feminine energy nurtures. But both energies exist within each of you. And when they are internally balanced, external balance becomes possible. This is why chasing had to end. Because union cannot begin from imbalance. It begins from wholeness. 4. The energy of peace is the sign. Many people expect fireworks as confirmation. But the real sign of union is peace. A deep, steady knowing. No obsession. No anxiety. No frantic checking of messages. Just calm certainty. You no longer need to convince yourself. You no longer need tarot every week to reassure you. You feel it. And he feels it too. Peace is the frequency of alignment. When both of you operate from that frequency, love flows naturally. 5. The final letting go. Here is the paradox. Union often happens when you fully release attachment to outcome. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped gripping. You trust yourself now. You know that whether he arrives or not, you are whole. That self-sufficiency is magnetic. It tells the universe, I desire union, but I do not depend on it for worth. And that is when love becomes choice, not need. If he arrives, it is addition, not completion. You were never half. You were becoming. 6. A message to the divine masculine, spoken energetically. If you are watching this and you feel called out, if something inside you knows this message is about you, hear this. It's safe to love now. Strength is not measured by how much you suppress. It is measured by how much you can hold. Hold her emotions. Hold your truth. Hold the vision of something lasting. She does not need perfection. She needs presence. Choose consciously. Move with intention. Lead with integrity. Because union is not about possession. It is about protection of something sacred. 7. A message to the divine feminine. And to you. You who felt everything first. You who carried the intuitive weight of this connection. You who doubted yourself when he withdrew. You were never crazy. You were aware. But now your role shifts. No more convincing. No more over-explaining. No more shrinking. Stand steady. Receive what matches your growth. If he shows up aligned, meet him there. If he does not, continue rising. Your power was never in waiting. It was in evolving. 8. Union is built daily. Once reunion happens, the real journey begins. Daily communication. Daily empathy. Daily choice. Love must be practiced, not assumed. Check in with each other. Express appreciation. Resolve misunderstandings quickly. Do not let ego rebuild walls that growth tore down. Protect the connection. Nurture it. Because sacred love still requires effort. And effort given willingly becomes devotion. 9. The bigger purpose of this connection. Twin flame union is not only romantic. It is transformative. Together, your energies amplify. You inspire each other's purpose. You stabilize each other's weaknesses. You expand each other's vision. This connection changes families. It shifts generational patterns. It teaches unconditional love through experience. You didn't meet by accident. And you didn't suffer for nothing. Every tear carved capacity. Every separation strengthened resilience. Every lesson refined your heart. Now that strength becomes shared. 10. The moment is now. If you feel the shift. If you sense the calm. If you notice synchronicities increasing. Trust it. Do not sabotage it with fear. Do not delay it with doubt. The divine masculine is no longer waiting. And neither are you. Love is not approaching someday. It is aligning now. Final inspirational message. Union doesn't happen when one chases. It doesn't happen when one awakens. It happens when both rise. When fear transforms into courage. When ego transforms into humility. When longing transforms into action. And that is where you stand. At the edge of a new chapter. Breathe. Trust. Allow. What is meant for you will not miss you. And what aligns with your growth will stay. If this message resonated with your journey, I want you to do 3 things. 1. Comment below which stage you feel you're currently in, separation, awakening, or nearing union. 2. Share this video with someone who needs reassurance on their twin flame path. 3. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive into conscious love and spiritual alignment. Your story is unfolding. And the best chapters are written when both souls are finally ready. The divine masculine is ready. The divine feminine is ready. Union is not a dream anymore. It's a decision. And it begins now.